There's actually no echo with us, but maybe Dave, you can go out and come back.
Did you say for me to go out and come back?
Yeah, because we don't have an echo.
Got it.
That was
Boom.
quick.
Okay. All right. So, let me just make sure I have everything here. All right. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Bezei Spiritual Healing Center. We are a non-denominational spiritual center, and we respect all religions and all spiritual traditions. So everybody's welcome to bring your thoughts, to bring your questions. We are here for us to grow together. And I just noticed that Dave was supposed to do the opening prayer. He's not here. Sunshine, would you be willing to do the opening prayer, sister?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let us all close our eyes. And let us take some deep inhales and exhales so that we are allowed to be really present to this beautiful moment on this wonderful Sunday morning where we gather in God's name, with our hearts and minds aligned with each other and open to the divine. Let us also connect with our feet, thanking Mother Earth for her continuous sustenance during our incarnation. Thank you, God, for your mercy, your love, your patience, your support and guidance for us every single day for lifetimes. It is with your mercy that we have this opportunity to learn new lessons, including this morning, where we are allowed to work on our inner transformation, to become more aligned with your love and light, to surrender our will more and more so to yours, so that the golden rule will become our modus in our lives, where we know just simply returning good for evil is the only path, and where we never forget that there is no salvation without charity, always finding and seeing the good in everything and everyone, always being indulgent with our brothers and sisters, since we know that their shortcomings are our shortcomings, and to forgive ourselves for our own mistakes for lifetimes, and of course, forgiving our brothers and sisters always, always. We pray that the healing doctors and mentors of this group will support our dear brother Mark today during his talk, that his mentor will be really close, and that we are present, allowing ourselves to let his words wash over our hearts and minds. And with this, we ever so humbly ask for permission to begin our service this morning. Thank you, and so be it, and so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, sister. Thank you. So Bezei Spiritual Healing Center is a member of the United States Spiritist Federation, and our spiritual beliefs are based around scientific, philosophical, and religious principles of Spiritism. So we all studied the books from Allan Kardec and all the entire codification. So we are always here learning something. And as Emmanuel, the spirit mentor of Chico Xavier, taught us, knowledge and awe and love are the wings for our spiritual evolution. And that is the reason why the service is divided into two parts. The first, we always have someone speaking and sharing findings from remarkable and qualified mediums and spirits. But during this moment, it's really important that you actively listen and participate, since your mentor is already supporting you and your needs while you're hearing the insights from the speaker. So we highly encourage you to take some notes because something will deeply resonate with you. And carrying and working in these reflections along the week is what will really sustain the energy that you are receiving while you are here. Then the second part is going to be a hands-on healing pass, where your mentor will be working with BSH mediums and the benefactors of the good for you to receiving the healing energy or whatever energy that you are in need. And we do have a lot of opportunities for us to be together. So I will be sharing with you all my screen so you can see all the time that we are together. So from Monday to Sunday, every day at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we are together for us to pray. Everybody's welcome to join us. It's in the same link. On Mondays, we have internal service, and this one is closed for the mediums. And we do a healing service. So we pray for all of those who are in need. So if you or anyone who you know is in need, please send us an email to info@bsh.org, info@bshcenter.org, and we'll be happy to add this person to the treatment book. Please make sure that he or she knows that they are in treatment. So during the service from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., the person is resting, is reading the gospel, is reading something that is really going to enable them to receive and to stick with the energy. On Tuesdays, we just started a new book called On the Canvas of the Infinite, and this is a book study with the Divine Light group led by Sunshine Beck. Everybody's welcome to join us from 6:30 to 7:30 in the same link. On Wednesdays, we have fraternal assistance. This one is individual by arrangement. So if you, again, or anyone who needs, want to vent, to pray together, we are here for you. We are here with you. You're not alone. So please consider us as part of someone who is willing to see you thrive. So just let us know and we'd be happy to assign someone to talk to you. Also on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 7:30, we are studying the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. Everybody's welcome to join. On Thursdays, we are reading the book Living Spring by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier, also an amazing book. Everybody's welcome to join us. And every second Thursday of each month, we have an in-person study followed by prayer and healing services. The location is to be defined, but if you are in the Sacramento area and you are interested, please let us know and we'll be happy to share the address with you. On Sundays, we get together from 10 to 11:30-ish, and from 6:30 to 7:30, we are starting the book, The Messengers, and next week, so it's going to be really amazing. Everybody's welcome to still come and finish the book No Solar. And it's an amazing book. So everybody's welcome to join us as well. And as I said, we have two parts of the service. So the first one, we will have our beloved friend, Mark, talking to us. For those who do not know Mark, he's an American born and bred, having lived his entire life in California, save 1 year he lived in Hawaii. He's raised Catholic. Mark left the church at 16 and was dormant spiritually for almost 30 years. When he became a father, he discovered a power greater than himself, and life has not been the same since. Mark found Spiritism in 2018 and has learned enough to realize he's exactly where he's meant to be. A lifetime musician and technologist, Mark is now retired, focused on his spiritual development, and is still learning how to fly with both wings, knowledge, and charity. He will be talking to us about return to physical life, and we are very happy to have you here, brother. Thank you so much. Please feel welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Kiki. Let's see. First of all, sincere appreciation for the opportunity to speak formally. And yet it's going to be formal in the sense of the questions and answers. It's going to be, as is usually the case, a whole lot of mark flavoring in a variety of ways maybe you've not seen before. So the first thing I want to do is say that during all my years of Christianity, I was pretty unconscious of the fact that there were multiple Bibles. And it wasn't until my children were born and I took an active role in the church that they were raised in that I began to realize all the different versions of the Bible and studied 3 or 4 different versions of the Bible. But I'll tell you, the one that made the most impact to me is the one that was written for Americans. It's a version of the Bible called The Message. And it takes the NIV version of the Bible, which is probably the most common worldwide, and it does a little bit of interpretation. And so I was heavily influenced in my knowledge of the Bible by being able to read it in American English, if you will, and then go back and read the original text and understand the subtleties of the language that was used back then. And now in Spiritism, the same thing occurs. We will read literature from the 1850s or the early 1900s, and it's not what an American is used to in terms of content. So there's a lot of interpretation, a lot of different changes. I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about before I jump into slides. So in Proverbs in the Bible, Proverb number 29 says, "A man who remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy." In the Message, that very same line says, "For people who hate discipline and only get more stubborn, there will come a day when life tumbles in and they break. But by then, it'll be too late to help them." I don't know about you, but when I read the Message, I understand it. Now I go back and I read about stiff-necked, many rebukes will be destroyed without remedy, and I get a context of what it's about. So I'm going to try to do that today with some art. Okay. Now, if you've been with us throughout this year, you know we've been studying this chapter. And in this chapter, through the previous questions, and here's Mark's American version of this, we've learned some very key points. The word soul and the word spirit can be thought of as the same thing quite often. And often they are interchangeable. Now, there are a couple times when there's specificity. For the most part, you can think of them as the same. And we learned that in this first part of this chapter. Now, in this topic of reincarnation, we also learned there's a prelude, and it's a required process before we reincarnate in a new body. We learned the soul is joined with that new body most often. But there are cases where that does not happen. And that's an example of what happens with an abortion. We learned that the soul carries forward moral and intellectual faculties of humankind, carries forward from prior lives, or by what has been intended for us to have all along. And these might contribute to the purpose of this new life. We learned that the new body can actually be an obstacle for the soul, depending on the effectiveness of the organs, including the brain. This is where we get into the subject of handicap. And we know that we learned that the new soul can be significantly impacted by mental illness, including insanity. Now, this is a very important statement because many people confuse mental illness with soul and spirit. Well, one can impact the other, but they are not the same. Okay, so again, these are my interpretations of the previous pages and questions and answers that we've already learned. I'm going to take that same approach of being very free to do my own interpretation, and I'm going to count on you all to kind of set me straight. So the next set of questions I realize are yes or no questions. And so here's what I think of the 379. Can the spirit of a child be as developed as the spirit of an adult? That's a yes or no. Think about your own answer, your own interpretation. Can the spirit of a child be as developed as the spirit of an adult? And again, I'm going to show you the actual wording by Kardec of the questions that were asked of the spirit. 380. In a very young child, if handicapped in any way, does the spirit think as a child or as an adult? So if the child has a handicap of any kind, is it conscious of that? 381. If a child dies at a young age, does the spirit immediately regain its prior abilities? What do you think? That's a yes or no question. 382. Does the incarnate spirit suffer? This is the new infant suffer or child. If handicapped in any way during childhood, is there an actual suffering that is taking place? And then there's 3 what or why questions. As you and I might ask them, we would ask, what is the purpose of a spirit having to experience childhood? Why are a child's first expressions those of crying? And what is the reason for a change in character as a child ages through adolescence? Is it the spirit that is changing? Okay, so let's see what these questions really look like and what the answers are. So the first one, you can see my wording, and now you can see how he actually worded it. And the answer is, maybe more so if it is more evolved. Only its imperfect organs keep it from fully manifesting itself. But by law, it must act according to the instrument it serves. It cannot do something that the body is not capable of doing, or the spirit and soul is not capable of doing. In a very young child, how does it think? And again, there may be obstacles that impact its ability to freely manifest itself. And this is the answer. While a child, it is natural that the as yet undeveloped organ of intelligence cannot provide at all with the intuition of an adult. Therefore, its intelligence is quite limited until age matures its reason. There is no born with intelligence. Now, the next question many parents will ask is, well, when does it begin to mature? When does it begin to gain consciousness? And the answer is, of course, that varies with each spirit, with each body. But here's one thing I thought was interesting. The dreams of a child do not have the same characteristics as the dreams of an adult. Children dream appropriate for their age. Okay. If a child dies at a young age, does it regain its former vigor, its abilities? Again, that was a yes or no question. And the answer is it should, since it's no longer negatively impacted by the body. But it does not regain its former lucidity until the separation is complete. And that's an entire process as well, just as there's a process to reincarnate, there's a process to disincarnate. So does the spirit suffer in any way when there are constraints, handicaps, diseases? No, there's no suffering. Childhood is a necessity. It is natural and corresponds to the designs of providence. It is a time of repose for the spirit. And I found this somewhat comforting, that a parent who understands this really doesn't have to worry about what their infant child is feeling. It is not till the child gets older that they'll begin to have an understanding. But in those early years of childhood, they don't know any better. And it's wrong to call attention to it. Shouldn't say wrong. It can have not so good effect. Okay. So now we get to these what and why questions. What is the purpose? What is the usefulness of a spirit having to go through childhood? And as we all know, as living, breathing adults, we're here to be better than we were the day before. The spirit in an infant is no different. The beauty of this is that the child is far more open-minded to everything around it, and therefore can be materially affected for the positive or the negative. Definitely for the positive, as it would assist in its progress. And so notice the last sentence: person in charge of its education should contribute towards this goal. And that should be a unified goal. Why are a child's first expressions those of crying? Well, this is interesting to know because it's all about mom. It's to make sure mom understands that it's her responsibility to ensure that the baby gets the care it needs, not just an infant. And I, I think this last sentence is probably better stated in some way. I did not want to take a chance doing so, but it's almost like he's chastising us for questioning this. And until you've been through parenthood, you don't necessarily have the perspective that this thing is talking. Although many people who don't experience parenthood experience it as a relative, a great aunt, a sister-in-law, whatever the case may be, or a sibling. But again, the expression by the child is crying. Make sure that it's communicating something it needs, something that needs to be cared for. Okay, this next question has quite a bit of length in the answer. As you might expect, it's a what, why question. What is the reason for the change that occurs in character during adolescence? And is that the spirit that is changing? And, medical science calls this puberty. I think there's far more going on besides puberty. But the spirits tell Kardec, the spirit recaptures its true nature and reveals who it really was prior to its present incarnation. Wow. Now, I can tell you that when I read this the first time, I started thinking, I must not have the ability to objectively look at myself when this was going on, because I did not see any drastic changes. I definitely had drastic changes. I don't notice them as much in my own sons either, for whatever reason. Here's the statement. You do not know the secrets that the children conceal behind their innocence. You do not know what they are, what they have been, or what they will be. Nevertheless, with all that ignorance, we love and cherish them as though they are a part of us. So there's the parental role. But, I wish somebody had stamped this on my eyelids so I would see it every single day while we were raising them. Because, so many times innocence was not the word that I would be thinking of, even though they were good kids, even though they're good adults. Now, moms know this, and I would also say that sons of moms know this definitely. That's the greatest love of all. And there's also another question that gets asked. Why do strangers feel sweet affection and display tender benevolence towards a child? Usually. Why is that? Now, in this day and age, I'm sure people would also point out that they stay away from engaging directly with the child unless asked to do so by the parent or if the child makes it obvious. For example, my two boys got accustomed to running up and hugging older people. So we'd go to the grocery store and they'd go right up to strangers and hug them, and most strangers reacted very positively to that kind of affection. But that's the boys initiate. Not many times when, someone other than a relative or a neighbor or something like that display openly that kind of affection. There are reasons why they do. And I don't want to read all of this because this is where the lengthy answers come. But, again, I think the principle to remember is that the child's innocence does not truly reflect the state of advancement in relation to what they previously were. So when I had this discussion with Tanya about how my boys used to be, she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "But that's because they don't know any better. They were like that in previous lives as well." That went in one ear and out the other when she told me that. And when I read this in preparation for today, I remembered that conversation. That's who they were. Not necessarily something their mom or I taught them, but maybe. But they were like that right from the beginning, from a very young age. And that's just those two individuals. There's something else here that Kardec stresses. And for the parents whose love is necessary in their fragility. And I think that word fragility is significant because typically one or both parents view those children as fragile. Um, Male, female traits, upbringings, etc. But that word fragility, it's a variable. And so some people are huge about thinking their children are fragile, and some, go ahead, go kill yourself type of attitude. Go run and play on the freeway. But the principle here is that parents give them the affection and surround them with care and not prematurely let them make their own decision. That is perhaps societally where we have gone astray, prematurely letting them make their own decisions. And anyway, when children no longer need the protection and assistance that they've gotten during their adolescence and maybe even to their adult years, their true and individual character emerges, and the phrase is in all its nakedness. In other words, for everyone to see. If the character was thought to be good and was fundamentally good, then it will stay good. But if there were elements that were not as good, then those will certainly become more and more apparent over time. And I think there's, again, some interpretation of Kardec's wording here where if he's paraphrasing the spirits, then it's not Kardec that maybe would say this better. But if it's Kardec's interpretation of the spirits, then I think this maybe could be said better. Because when I see this kind of a statement, I bristle. Up comes this, wait a minute, you can't 100% accept everything. There's a reason this is making you think. And what this makes me think is I don't have enough trust in God for me to believe this statement. That's what doing this presentation has done for me. Because I haven't seen that God's ways are always the best. And so I hope you will think about that. Because if you think about it from the childlike perspective, ponder the possibility that the spirit of a child who was born among you may have come from a world on which it had acquired altogether different habits. And then ask yourself, maybe that's you. Maybe you came to this world from somewhere else. So as you think about your child or young children, think about yourself as well. How would you want this new being to remain in the midst of passions so diverse from normal? Inclinations and tastes different, opposite to others. How would you want it to incorporate yourself, assimilate into the environment, except in the way God wanted it to? And the only way to do that is to experience it through childhood, allowing for childhood development to adjust. It's kind of interesting to think about it from both ends, from both the child end and the parent end, or even from the God end. And so when you think about all that, you think about when you end this life. We will be in another form of childhood in the midst of a new family. Those that went before us. In that new existence, we will be ignorant of the new habits. If you've been studying or read No Solar, seen the movie, the whole world of habits there completely foreign to it. A whole world of sensations and terminologies completely foreign to us. We won't know about the customs. We won't know about how those relationships work. The speaking language is no longer as important as the mental language. So it is fascinating to think about these questions that seem to be about childhood, but really what they are is about the perpetual cycle of returning to reincarnation and the potential of other worlds being part of each incarnation at any time. So childhood also provides another purpose, and that's this idea of improvement and purity. And so we have, in this word, fragility of the early years means that they're flexible, they're open-minded, they're able to be directed, they're able to be taught, they're able to experience cause and effect intelligently by those who should be aiding their progress and their lessons. And that's when character can be improved, bad tendencies can be addressed. And again, this is typically the role of parents. But in today's society, we know that it takes a community, whether it's a family or a friend, but it takes more than just parents, teachers, etc. So, the whys come down to it's not only useful, it's necessary and indispensable. It's also a natural result of God's laws. Okay, there are five more questions. And they are under the caption of earthly sympathies and antipathy. And I would just say this word antipathy is probably not a commonly used word. So I thought it appropriate to just give me some definitions to set the context here. So what is sympathy? It's a feeling of pity or sorrow for the distress of another. It's the ability to commiserate, meaning a real understanding of what somebody else is going through. So here's that mutual understanding or feeling between people. Now, there's another word that is used, not necessarily in this chapter, but there's another word called empathy, and it's different. It's the ability to identify with or understand another's situations or feelings. So it's similar to sympathy, but it is also far more intellectual. It's not just emotional, if you will. Sympathy tends to be an emotional thing. Empathy seems to be full of thoughts, what that person is going through, has gone through, will go through, etc. And often, just one more thing, oftentimes empathy is associated with you've been there yourself. You've walked in those shoes. You've had that same issue. So what is antipathy? It's an extreme dislike, an aversion, or a repugnant. Now that not necessarily towards a person, would be towards hospitals, doctors, would be towards politicians. But it's, this opposition and feeling, this dislike, this distaste. So as we read the answers now, what I believe is that mediums will understand these definitions and also think about even when these only apply to incarnate humans, or if they also apply to feelings interchanged with discarnate spirits. So if anybody would like to comment on that, feel free. Okay, so 386. Could two individuals who have already known and loved each other meet in another corporeal existence and recognize each other? Will recognize each other? No. Feel attracted to each other? Yes. Frequently, intimate connections founded on sincere affection arise from no other cause. Two individuals are drawn together by apparently fortuitous circumstances, which is actually the result of the attraction of two spirits who have been searching for each other amidst the crowds. And I would just say I have complete belief in this question and answer. I know it on a personal level. Not being able to recognize each other. Notice this first part. Recognize each other? No. I don't know if I got great pleasure in that or not. It is only long after our two orbits separated and we were on completely different paths did I even have the perspective of asking, well, did we know each other in a previous life? That thought never even occurred to me at the time. And so the answer is not always. The memory of past lives might hold greater disadvantages than we might think. After death, we'll recognize each other and we'll remember the time we spent together. And of course, we'll be judged on how we were with each other and, relative to what our mission was. Is sympathy always the result of having known each other previously? The answer is no. Spirits who have affinities naturally search for each other without them having been previously acquainted as incarnates. Okay, so that sympathy It's simply based on, I call it harmonic frequencies. Two spirits that are vibrating at the same frequency or similar frequencies in harmony. Wouldn't the encounters which sometimes occur between certain persons and which are often attributed to chance be the effect of a kind of sympathetic relationship? Well, among thinking beings, there are connections that we do not know anything about. Magnetism is at the core of this science, and someday we'll know what that really means. I find this fascinating, only because we know it's not chance. Where does the instinctive repulsion come from when certain individuals meet for the first time? This is the antipathy. Well, there are antipathetic spirits who perceive and recognize each other even before saying one word to each other. This one's a toughie because as old as I am, I cannot think of a time I've ever seen somebody in a room or on the street or looked into their eyes or whatever and felt this way. I would have to hear them speak or watch them act to have any kind of sense of, that kind of feeling. But that's me. Maybe unconsciously I have. There's a number of books that deal with this, with the generations in the South who are raised without a shred of bigotry in their home. But because they're white and where they live, they carry a burden. And they find themselves acting and thinking, not aloud, not outwardly, but realizing the distinction between black skin and white skin. How does that happen? Maybe prior lives is the example. Because again, they are not supremacists in any way, one way or the other. They are not militant in any way. That's not who they are personality wise, culturally. But they know through talking with their shrinks that something instantaneous that happens. I don't get it. I don't get it. It could only mean something from a prior life. That's the only way I can possibly explain it. So is instinctive antipathy always a sign of bad nature? Two spirits are not necessarily bad just because they are not sympathetic. It's because they have that sense, like what I was just explaining. Antipathy may originate from dissimilarity in a way of thinking. As they evolve, however, the shades of dissimilarity are erased and the antipathy disappears. Now, I'm old enough to say that my first visit to Birmingham, Alabama in the 70s bore no resemblance to driving through Birmingham, Alabama in 2023. I mean, it was night and day. I was shocked at the amount of very visible, racial inequality back in 1970s on two visits. But in 2023, completely different sense. So I think this is a valid answer. Doesn't mean people are inherently bad. I think this is the last question. Does the antipathy between two individuals arise first in the one whose spirit is worse or in the one whose spirit is better? And that's really a nice subjective thing, but it arises in both, but the causes and effect are different. If there is a bad spirit feeling antipathy towards someone, it's probably tied to them being able to judge and unmask them. That they're exposed as to who they really are. And therefore they have this envy, hatred, jealousy, whatever, towards anyone who would be disapproving of them, actually inspiring them to do bad things. The good spirit, on the other hand, is repulsed by the bad one because it knows the other will not understand it and that neither shares the same sentiments. However, it feels no hatred nor jealousy toward the other. It is simply content to avoid it and be it. Pray for it. Walk away from it. That is a wonderful opportunity for most people to change lifetimes of habits where you carry feeling with you. And instead you learn to just let it go. So, here are these three words again. And this is such a wonderful piece of art. So many interpretations. And I just thought for this, what are we doing here? Thank you, Alan Kardec, and thank you, BSH.
Thank you, Mark. This is so pretty. Especially right now in this moment of my life that I have a young one here. But also it makes me think so much about our responsibility, right? Like not only as parents, but our responsibility as citizens to all children, especially those, I have to keep an eye on, especially those who are, like in orphanages or foster care, who are in deep, deep need of being loved and guided. It just like reinforces to me the importance of us paying attention to all of those who are in need, because those who are, like those who have your parents, each parent will answer will answer to their responsibility. But what about those who could not have the parents around for whatever reason, by choice or not, but for whatever reason? So I think it's interesting first to think about that. The other thing too is how interestingly God helps us to evolve our own morals through children, right? Like, as you were saying, we don't know necessarily which are the habits that they are coming from. So sometimes whenever we lose patience with the kids because they are doing one thing or another that is not necessarily the one that we wanted them to do, this also reminds me about the importance of us teaching them virtues like patience, like persistence, perseverance. Those are things that sometimes we just slip them away, and then children helps us to remember about them. And then the other, while you were, excuse me, also talking about the sympathy and antipathy, I don't know how to say that word, of the spirits, it reminded me about a statement that I will say Chico Xavier said. In Portuguese it will make more sense, but in English it will too, hopefully. But it says that when someone deserves at least is when they need at most our love. So whenever someone is doing something that, like brings us into a very challenging moment, this is when we need to love the most, because this is when we need to forgive. This is when we need to respect. This is when we need to be patient. This is when we need to be tolerant. This is when it needs the most. So I just thought that it was, yeah, I see, sweetie. I just thought it was interesting, and it brings me to reflection on how important those relationships are.
No, I was hoping, I know Mosen's here, but I was hoping that our teacher from Santa Rosa would also be here, because teachers quite frequently will recognize, in the first week of a new year, those children that are not getting parental guidance, those children that get their guidance from another source, if at all. And, over the years, the most experienced teachers seem to have a knack, for identifying those kids and doing what they can early on to establish, a better way for the child. But it also, how many teachers give up so much to try to do that? It really, it's a sad case. It's a sad case. Most,
Yes,
yeah, I'm sure you have experiences as well.
thank you very much for your nice presentation and full of knowledge. That is really good. And especially before they come to the school, they are with the parents, and the parents need to have a lot of knowledge about the children, how they grow up, and how important and how soft they are. They accept everything, and you don't need to talk to them from your behavior, from your action. They learn a lot, and that is why we should be very careful. And everywhere, I don't know, in the media, in the church, or uh, in the TV or anywhere, there should be a lot of information how to behave with the children, how help them to grow up spiritually, and that is nice, because after that we should have more training for the teacher, especially for the teacher in preschool, in the kindergarten. Usually we accept everybody who comes as a kindergarten teacher or preschool teacher or the daycare center. We don't think that this age is very important. What they learn in this age is most important in the whole life. And if we want to have a good society, a good people in the country, we should take care of the education in the early childhood. That is very important. And I'm glad that you bring this subject, and we should think about that and try everywhere to bring it and talk about that. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. I would just say one more thing, in the short journey with Spiritism, there have certainly been many different educational reference points for this topic. And so as I was thinking about many of them as I was preparing this presentation, the answers to these questions kind of speak for themselves. I didn't think I needed to make references to Chico, Joanna, or spirits or writers or any other stories where they talk about, children personalities and when they emerge in the first 7 years and all that. It's a whole different set of focuses. These questions are all about the spirit and what that spirit is going to be coming from and going to be. So I stuck with that.
That's true. I just posted a link in our chat to a book that actually Vanessa Anceloni mentioned to us when she was here the last time. It's called The Family Virtues Guidebook. And I bought it and I started reading. It's such an amazing book, so beautiful. And it brings many practical ways for us to, first, I think that because, right, like we cannot teach something that we do not have. So I think that first we exercise the virtue within us, and then how, like, practical examples on how to teach that to our kids. So regardless if we have a kid or not, this book is really amazing because it helps us to further develop those virtues and how to apply them to our day-to-day. And it's it's really beautiful. So just wanted to share with you all as well. And I will post. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Very creatively presented in Mark fashion. No, I appreciated it. And I really liked, I think it was the last or maybe the second last question where, you know, and antipathetic spirits and how the effect can be different, and the one spirit knowing they're not understood, and there's a tendency to move away. And I think it reminds us all the importance about understanding. You know, I know when we were studying in one of the groups, and there was kind of this comment of like, well, you know, I'll never understand people, so why should I even try? Or I don't even go there because I know I can't understand everybody. But I think that understanding, you know, is a virtue. And so maybe it's just in the trying, even if we come to the conclusion, I can't connect with that person, you know, but it is in the trying. And that is the point of freeing ourselves, because it's that place of, I don't want to understand that person. It's almost like a source of revenge. You know, I'm not going to understand you, like feeding the fuel of revenge or hate. So anyway, it just reminded me about, and also when, you know, Jesus said, when we're not understood, you know, he told the disciples, you know, shake the dust from your sandals and move on. Sometimes we cannot, I know my tendency is like, when I feel like I'm not understood, I want to explain even more, which only usually inflames the situation. So I think these are really, really important questions. And it does kind of give us pause, because just like that picture you showed at the end, that's a really good visual to have. Yeah, that, you know, you know, our external is just one aspect of us, that we are spirits with a physical body. So I think it was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. And there's a lot to kind of contemplate throughout the day for what you shared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, I had a question. I didn't understand maybe, right? It is I think that the spirituality is not a teaching, it's something receiving. It means that the person should be eager to get it. Then we can teach and learn to somebody. Is it right?
Oh, very, very true. You know, how aware is the teacher of the receptiveness of the student? You know, if the student is not capable of hearing, sitting still, whatever, then you're going to have to figure out a different way to communicate. If the person is distracted by other things, then you need to remove the distractions, whether they're electronic devices or whatever, you know. Some of that seems like pretty basic stuff, but you know, in today's society, you have to be sensitive to individual rights. You know, if we're talking about a 6 or an 8-year-old, it's one thing. If you're talking about a 16 or an 18-year-old who just spent $600 of her own money to buy this top of the line iPhone, you better be careful what you're doing when you take that away from her. You know,
Thank you.
Every circumstance is different. Every spirit is different, and you know, error on the side of caution. I can't, whether it's parents or not. You know, the days of doing it. What is it? Doing it my way or the highway. The way do as I say, not as I do. Those days are gone. You know, the world is observing now, and I'll tell you something else. The children of today are more cognizant, and I don't know if this is because of their parents or not, but they're more cognizant of news media than we give them credit for. Okay? They are very cognizant of biased reporting, false news, and they have their own sources of information. And it's stunning. And I'm talking about kids who are still in high school.
And something else, the first day that I came to the center, that was in Auburn, and I saw a lady with red hair, and she gave me a hug and said, "We know each other." And our soul is very attached to each other. That you said that the souls know each other, and without any talk, they can understand each other. I had this experience the first day that I came to the center. Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right. So, Mark, thank you once more, brother. I agree with Teresa. It was a very creative and Mark fashion. Thank you for sharing with us your learnings. I will stop the live streaming and let us take 2 minutes break, and then we are back for the passes. Please do not forget your bottle of water and to write down the names of those who are in. So